Hello everyone, this is Aya from Hinawi Software. Our topic for today is really important. As we all know, there is an entire roadmap for the HRMS activities. And in every video, in every part, I cover an entire activity of the HRMS along with all its different actions and transactions and workflows and steps. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the end of service form. We are going to go through the steps, through the workflow and the process of it in order to understand how this specific activity works in Hinawi desktop application. So let's start. First of all, in creating an activity for end of service, the answer is definitely yes, because it's possible to create an end of service form. Same thing applies to editing, because after you create end of service, whether for the reason of termination, whether for the reason of resigning, any reason, whether for a limited contract or not, so in the voiding or cancelling of the end of service form, as you can see here, the answer is no, because you cannot void or cancel an end of service form after you have created it. You can only delete. And deleting is possible. From this action, we can see that when you click on delete, it will be possible to delete that specific form of end of service which you have created earlier. Same thing applies to printing, because you can easily print a form regarding that end of service. And this is really important and useful to have a printed form, not just on the system. Printing the clearance is applicable on the end of service, because as we have seen before, printing the clearance was not applicable to so many different activities. Like printing clearance was always not applicable on them because they do not apply there. But regarding the end of service form, printing the clearance is possible and it's applicable and it's there. Now, regarding designing and printing that specific activity form, which is end of service, as you can see here, it's possible, 100% possible to design and print the form of the end of service. And regarding having a predefined template for importing or autofilling, as you can see here, the answer is no, because filling an end of service form is done at the time of wanting to create that specific end of service for a specific employee. So you cannot import any previous list containing employees who will go through the end of service activity, and you cannot autofill that as well. You have to fill it manually at the time of the request itself regarding end of service. Now, as you can see here, we do have a starting date and an ending date regarding end of service. This is applicable, 100% applicable, to specify the start date and the end date. And regarding the same month, because usually this is done in the same month, like normally within the same month, the answer is no, because it's not like recommended, or it's not very common to have a start date and an end date regarding end of service in the same month. So basically, the requesting date of creating the end of service might not be in the same month as the ending date of that specific end of service form. Like the complete process of creating and proceeding with end of service might not be in the same month. So as you can see here, this is not applicable. Same thing applies to all these fields. Same thing applies to days and hours. As you can see here, the answer is no, because this is used for other types of activities, such as, for example, absences, which uses the hour action, and days as well for like leaves and other types of activities rather than the end of service itself. And as you can see here, the percent of employees' salary doesn't actually depend, or the end of service doesn't depend on the percent of employees' salary. Whether the employee's salary was high or low, whatever the salary was, when there will be an end of service created for a specific employee, it will not depend whether the employee's salary is high or low to create that end of service, because when you want to create end of service, it will be created regardless of the percent of salary. The overtime, whether in 1.25 or 1.5, doesn't really have to do with end of service. They're not linked, they're not connected, and that's why overtime is not applicable for end of service. It's usually used for other types of activities, such as timesheet, for example. So it's not applicable to end of service. Same thing applies to taxes. As you can see here, the answer is no, because taxes are not applied on the end of service form. Taxes are applied on, for example, salary sheets or other types of activities. And regarding the employee pension, as you can see here, the answer is no. Employee pension is not applicable, unlike, for example, in creating a new type of leave, where we saw here that employee pension is applicable there, but in the end of service form, employee pension is not applicable. And regarding the monthly provision, the answer is definitely yes. Monthly provision is definitely applicable on the end of service form. So that's why it's used here, as you can see. And now regarding the approvals, end of service form definitely has an approval button. So basically, at the time of creating end of service, we can proceed forwards with the steps and approve that end of service. But definitely it will depend on the permissions for that specific user from the user access list. So the employee who basically, or the user who basically creates the end of service form might not be the same user who approves the end of service, depending on the user access list, definitely. But in general, there is an approval. However, you cannot edit that after approval. You cannot edit the form, you cannot void, you cannot delete. So once it's approved, it's just approved. There is a small note here saying that no deleting after approval, because when creating it, it reads from several modules and lists. So deletion will not be possible. This means that there's so much linking between other modules, other lists, other types of different forms, different windows. So therefore, regarding this, deletion will not be applicable and will not be possible. Once it's approved, it's just approved. However, as you can see here in the setup, we do have a setup regarding end of service. In that setup, we specify how will the workflow works regarding the termination, the resigning, what are the steps, the amount, how it's calculated, how is it different from a limited contract and not a limited contract, basically the main difference and comparison between them. And there is definitely an effective date regarding that setup. When will it start taking action? So as you can see here, the answer is yes for both of them. Yes here and here. And now regarding the status, we have created this table basically to make it easier for the user or for the prospective or specific customer or client to understand the process exactly regarding the status. Now, at the time of saving, the user has two main options to select from, whether active or inactive. So what this means that at the time of creating the end of service, let's say, for example, that creating end of service date is this date, okay? And when this is the date and the end of service effective date is on this date, in that case, we will see those different scenarios. Now, the employee's status at the time of creating the end of service, it can be actually still active. When we select this as active at the time of creating the end of service, the Manage Employees menu will definitely be used. However, all other HRMS activities menu will not be used, will not be applicable for using, even if the status is active. So this status of being active for the employee only allows him or her to use the Manage Employee menu, not the HRMS activities menu. However, when the employee's status is inactive at the time of creating end of service, both the manage employees menu and other HRMS activities menu will be inapplicable. They will not be possible to be used by for the employee. So that is the main difference between being active and inactive. Both HRMS activities menu in both cases will not be used, but the manage employees menu will be used only at the status of being active, not when being inactive. Now, notice here also one more thing we do have in this table is the salary sheet, basically the salary sheet activity. Now, the salary sheet at the time of being active, it can be used and it can be until the month of May only. May, and the salary sheet of the other 15 days of June will be paid with end of service benefit. Now, why is this? How is this calculated? Based on the date which we have set here. So the salary sheet will read from the create date and from the effective date. It will tell us here that there are 15 days of June which will be paid with the end of service benefits, because here it's June 15. So therefore there will be 15 days paid through end of service benefits, and all other previous days and months will be calculated normally through salary sheet till May. So until May it will be paid normally. From January 15th of January till actually May, complete May. And then the rest will be calculated through end of service benefits. And regarding this status, when the employee's status is inactive, as you can see here, the salary sheet activity is not used. It will not be used. The employee's name will not be even displayed or shown in front of us. It will not be there. So at the time of being active, the employee's status will be shown and the activity of that employee's salary sheet will be displayed clearly, but at the time of being inactive, that employee will not be appearing in the salary sheet at all. They will not be seen in the salary sheet. So that is how the end of service form works. Now, regarding the accounting effect, posting to accounting is possible for end of service, definitely possible, because at the time of creating the end of service and proceeding with that process, you will have to go to update to accounting menu and post that to accounting. And as you can see here, is the journal voucher or the payment voucher used? The JV is used. Regarding the accounting effect, you use the journal voucher. The payment voucher is not used. Of service, basically we have the cash payment, check payment, bank transfer. The three of them are applicable. There are three available to choose whether we want to pay through cash, check, or bank transfer, and this is decided at the time of setting the payment mode for the employee from the manage employee, from the set salary option regarding the manage employees. So from there, from manage employees menu, you go to set salaries and benefits, and then you specify the employee name and you go to payment mode of activities, and from there we specify what is the payment method regarding this specific activity for the specific employee. So not all employees might be the same regarding the payment method. Each one has his or her own payment method. However, updating to ledger, which means that no accounting entries will be there, is not applicable for end of service. You must select any payment method, but you cannot update to ledger. And in the salary sheet JV, as you can see here, the answer is no. It will not be through salary sheet. It will only be through paid through any of these three options. And the debit side of the end of service is basically end of service expenses. From its name, end of service expenses. Now, as you can see here, what is the salary status of employees who underwent or undergo through end of service. Basically, the status is inactive, as we have said before, because if you proceed forward with the end of service process, the employee will be inactive, and this means that you cannot create any activities for them, and they will be blocked from the salary sheet, and they cannot even have their names searched. And regarding the collections, receipt voucher is definitely used in the end of service form collection, and when rehired and refund end of service amount is given. So that is a small memo which should be taken into consideration, is that at the time of being rehired and refund, the end of service amount is given back. So in those special cases, it will be given back. And of course, end of service form can be created for both HR employees and timesheet employees. Not a specific type of employee, but both of them. And in the web module, as you can see here, end of service cannot be created through the web module. So although like we have other types of modules, other types of forms, applications other than the desktop application, however, end of service cannot be created from those applications. You cannot create end of service in the web module, and you also cannot create end of service in the mobile module. However, this is not permanent, it's not fixed. It can be added as an extra feature in the future. So today's date is the 22nd of June. So basically, this is not permanent. You might be watching this video like months later, years later, and you can definitely see that this specific feature, which I'm talking about here, will be added then. So this is not fixed. And of course, definitely, the salary sheet will be affected from the end of service. So anything you see here from all the activities will be affecting the salary sheet, whether through a direct effect or indirect effect, but the result is that the salary sheet will be affected. I will cover an entire video regarding salary sheets specifically, but in general, just keep in mind that everything you do before in the activities of any part of the software will be affecting the salary sheet. Now let's talk a little bit about the memo. As you can see here, the effective date, which also is applicable in the end of service because it has an effective date, you must make sure that it's perfectly accurate and correct before saving, because since like it's linked with many activities in the system and will definitely affect the salary sheet, it will definitely affect different months of the salary sheet. So you must make sure effective date for end of service is accurate, and for all other activities in general. And please make sure you read all pop-up messages on the screen, which pop up on the screen before saving, because they are crucial. And always check the employee's status in order to know, for example, why their names are not showing in the salary sheet. So for example, if an employee went through end of service and their status is inactive, the user might wonder why their names are not showing in the salary sheet, basically because they went through end of service and they are inactive. One more thing is that you always should follow up with the system rules, and it's basically customer responsibility if those rules, which has been discussed before, are broken. And whether, for example, you have many leaves, or the user finds that there are so many leaves regarding employees, all these leaves must be returned at the time the employee has returned back in order for the system to know when the employee has returned. Because there are different consequences, whether it's an early return, a late return, or return or on time. And as you can see here, it's possible to create multiple loans. Like this workflow and this process is pretty like possible and simple. However, you have to make sure that you proceed with the entire process for the loans. And in addition to that, Notice here that if the customer uses a predefined template to create additions, deductions, and posting the salary sheet is automatic, then in this case approval is not required. Of course, this is logical, because if you choose anything to be automatic, then there will be no need to approve that. It will instantly be posted to the salary sheet. And also, calculating of annual leaves balance is pretty important. You should always keep in mind that how does the calculation of annual leaves works. Basically, the system will read the total due days from the joining date until the start date of the leave, and then this will be minus the total number of days which has been already taken before. And this occurs if the leave's opening balance is not used. So that is the correct way of calculating the annual leaves balance. And in case of opening balance, the system will not take the joining date, it will take the next day of the opening balance. So this is as well an important point which should be taken into consideration. And most activities, of course, needs to be approved. They need to be approved before creating the salary sheet. Like 90% or the majority of activities require to be approved before creating end of service, especially those which have like which require immediate approval. For example, if an activity requires approval, but after 2 or 3 months, it can be postponed. However, if it will be affecting the current salary sheet for this month, then it must be approved as soon as possible. And the user cannot create salary sheets for any month unless the previous month is created. So you cannot skip months in creating salary sheet. And it's possible also to approve the salary sheet depending on the different departments, positions, employees. So you cannot, for example, keep in mind that only the entire salary sheet for all employees will be created. No, you can split that depending on different positions, months, and employees. And always make sure that once you start the payroll start date and once you set that start date of the payroll, the salary sheet will be created based on that date. And you cannot, for example, later change again since the salary sheet will already be created. And always remember that any activity which needs to be posted to accounting must be posted to accounting successfully, and that any activity or any type of payment which requires to be paid must be paid through the HRMS activities menu itself, not from the accounting menu, since this is an ERP system and everything is clear and straightforward. And it's like the payment cannot be split in the salary sheet regarding the same employee. So for different employees, yes, of course, different payment methods can be selected. But for the same employee, you cannot choose, for example, that different payment methods are used for the same employee. Now let's talk a little bit about the stop or release the salary of employees. Now regarding this activity, it's recommended to be used for those employees which have been absent for like a few days without giving any previous notice. But for example, if an employee is absent for weeks, months, more than that, then leave without pay is more recommended to be used rather than the stop or release the salary. And finally here we have that the absconded workers activity is used when there is official data that the employee has left the country entirely because they ran away basically. So that's why it's used. And the main difference between this activity and the stop or release salary activity is that the stop or release salary is when it's certain that the employee is in the country but not 100% sure in the absconded workers where they are. So in the absconded workers, we're not 100% sure the current location, like they ran away, they're out of country, we don't know their location. But in the stop or release salary, it's different, and we are certain that they are in the country, but their salary is just stopped, but they are still in the country. So that is how it works. Basically, that is the main content, that is the main explanation for today's video. I hope it was clear, easy, precise, and all information is delivered accurately. Please make sure you watch our other videos, which will contain other parts of the HRMS activities module, because in every video I cover an entirely different topic. So make sure you watch those parts in order to use the system easily. And please don't forget to share this video with everyone interested in an ERP system, more specifically in those modules. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Your call is very important to us.